Whoever you are and whenever you are, welcome good souls of the planet and beyond to Paranormal Now. I'm Alan B. Smith. Join us as we traverse the cosmic highway of paranormal portals and tantalizing turnoffs. Joining me tonight, I have two guests. In the first hour, we have Ken Cherry, author of MARC SLADE INVESTIGATES, the Stephenville UFO. And in the second hour, we have Cheryl Costa, who all of you, I think, know very well here on this network. And we have a lot to talk about. We will be covering everything from secret agendas and conspiracy by them or they. And Ken will lead us down that rabbit hole a little bit tonight, including and tied into the 2008 Stephenville UFO Incident, which I still think is one of the most underrated, absolutely underrated cases. And it's funny, I was just speaking to someone else who does what we do here on KGRA, and they kind of thought Stephenville was overrated. Clearly I was in disagreement with them. But you know, there we are. And that's the fun of this. We get to find out. And so Ken will give us his side of the story because he was there on the ground, when this case, broke. And so hold on just a little bit. And a friendly reminder, in the second hour, if you want to talk to Cheryl Costa in the last 30 minutes to ask your questions of her, the call-in lines for the Paranormal Radio app hotline is 855-472-5483. That's 855-472-5483 or 85KGRA live. And of course, during the show, if you want to share your thoughts with me on Twitter, you can find me on @paranormal_now and on Instagram @paranormal now. And a friendly reminder for all of you, you know that I'm a fan of the UFO Monument Park in Sheffield, Massachusetts. So if you are in the Northeast and you need to just get out, jump in a car, drive somewhere, it's a really beautiful park. Highly suggest it. And I know for myself, like it's been rough. It's been rough the past, God, how many months now? 8 months, in New York City. And, so many of us New Yorkers, we don't have transportation. We use public transportation. So, getting out of the city is a big deal for us, even if it's just for a day, just to get some fresh air. Gosh, we were visiting the parents only once during this period of time, and it was just great to get some outside air. And I know with the holiday season coming up, a lot of you are probably going to have similar Thanksgiving experiences like us. We are social distancing with family for a myriad of reasons and health precautions and all that jazz, and it's just a strange time. And so, we are doing what we can. We'll be Zoom or Skype calling together as a family. So that'll be an interesting, it kind of reminds me of like a sci-fi movie from the 80s that we're living in right now. It's bizarre, as if families on Mars, and we're all connecting via video, but this is the reality that we're in. And, I for one just cannot wait till we can just get back to being able to just go outside, hug our friends, family, and get back together again. But with that said, keep that warmth and love alive during the holiday season. And happy Thanksgiving, because I won't be speaking with you until after Thanksgiving. So I wish you all and yours, your loved ones, the absolute best. All right, so I'm going to bring on my good friend, Ken Cherry. Ken, how are you?
Good. It's always good to be with you, Alan.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Hey, I want to set the record straight on how important is Stephenville.
Sure, please, yeah.
I have appeared on a special Dateline, NBC's Dateline, and they ranked the top 10 UFO cases in history, and they ranked Stephenville as number 3. Behind Phoenix Lights was number 2, and I don't remember if Roswell was number 1. But at any rate,
yeah. What are the standards for ranking? How does one decide?
Well, I'm not sure exactly how they or why they ranked it as number 3, but in terms of numbers of witnesses, the the qualification. I mean, the backgrounds of many of these witnesses that we had were experts. I mean, we had law enforcement, we had pilots, we had people who worked for airlines, we had people who worked for defense contractors who were completely aware of all the different types of aircraft. So, I mean, the expertise of the witnesses, I think, had a great deal to do with it. And then, of course, there were the number of sightings that correspondent testimony was so similar. And then we had 3 different radar studies capturing the images of the UFO on radar, and all 3 of them. And in one case, because the UFO came back a number of times over a period of a year, in one case, the witness testimonies about where they saw the UFO and the time that they saw it lined up precisely with the radar data. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. And so I think probably the credibility of all the witnesses and just a massive amount of data that we collected, probably put it up there in the number 3. I think one of the slides that I sent to you, it might be of interest to folks because there were 3 police officers on the same shift that evening, January the 8th, 2010, and 2008, pardon me. That's not it. The one, the composite drawings of the UFO, but these 3 police officers were on duty in different parts of the city and all had a sighting of this craft. And when they came back to the station house that evening, one of them says, "Oh, you won't believe what happened, what I saw." And the other one said, "No, let me tell you." And then the third one chimed in. But they all saw this craft in different areas of the city, so that these were independent sightings. But they had a draftsman's program on the computer, and they sat down, and the 3 of them agreed that this is what they saw from different angles, and they include different angles. One of the police officers was sitting in a patrol car with a radar that he was, it was a radar trap catching speeders. And he said suddenly everything went quiet and he couldn't figure out. And he looked up in the sky and this enormous UFO was looming over his car. He didn't know what to do. So he just pointed his radar up in the sky. And he said, "You got one reading. It started slowly about 15 miles an hour. Then the next instant it was gone." And so, we did have a number of other sightings by witnesses in that area later on that evening. So these folks told the same story over and over. And that's one of the reasons why I think it is probably one of the most important.
Yeah, so when you're looking at these images, so you have this pancake-like image, right? With the lights, and when on the image there's a red on the top, red dots, and then white dots. Are those extensions of the craft, like antenna or something like that?
These are there were orbs coming out of this thing, as cited by a number of witnesses. So, I guess some of the media dubbed this thing as a mothership. Because there were different types of sightings. One was this large, incredibly large. There were people who had been on Navy battleships, carriers and so forth that said this thing was much larger. As a matter of fact, one of the first witnesses was a pilot, Mr. Steve Allen. He said the thing was easily a mile long and a quarter of a mile wide. So this was huge, and of course it did have lights on it, but there were other orbs in connection with this at different times, and at different times the orbs were just seen by themselves. And it might be one, then suddenly it flickered, and there were 5, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them.
Yeah, see, I can see if people see these composites, it is reminiscent of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, right? with had those kind of lights coming off. Of course, obviously that was one whole craft, but that it wasn't just a saucer. That there was other things going on.
Yes,
around this thing.
Right. But these are police officers. These are not, the ordinary, somebody that you're going to take them seriously when they tell you. And they independently witnessed this. I must say, though, that we did have other law enforcement officials, even elected constable in the county, who went quite on the record about multiple sightings that he had. And so, we had very responsible people who came forward. As a matter of fact, this is a small college town, and we had very few young people, no college students. This is not some product of a vision with after wacky weed or something like that. For the most part, I recall them being gray-haired, middle class, middle income, fairly well-educated people. A lot of them with advanced degrees and so forth who had careers and came back, to their native Texas and retired and so forth. So it was a very important sighting. But aside from the public aspect of it, there was a lot that went on behind the scenes that I, as a result, wrote a book that was turned down by many publishers. They didn't want to get sued because I named names and times and so forth. And so I had to rewrite it, as a novel. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of what I discovered about secrecy and what was going on behind the scenes is contained in my book. You don't have to have a vivid imagination to see what I'm saying there. So,
and it's safer. It's safer for you too, I would imagine.
Well, I have been harassed quite a bit. I've been practically run off the road by black SUV in the middle of the night. I've had my phones bugged. My provider for my telephone and computer and TV found that my phone service had been bugged. Actually, I called them up and said, I think my conversations are being listened in on. And so they did some tests and they came back and said, you're right. We did find something. Now, they could never find the source of it, but they did put in some blocking for it. But I've had so many other things, and it seems like almost every time I give an interview or whatnot, a plague of things begins to happen again.
Yeah, I remember during the Epic Voyages radio days, and you were releasing your book, and at the time, you were having some serious issues with your internet and your phone connection. Yeah, and it was bugged, right? Or something was there was some interference. There was all kinds of
That's among the things. I think we got off of an interview one night. We'd been on the radio on Skype for 2 hours, and just as we were wrapping up, my phone rang. I forgot to unplug my landline. And it said, City of Keller, which is where I live. And I went, what in the world are they doing calling this time of night? And I picked it up, and this female voice said, this is the dispatcher at the Keller Police Department. Would you please go to the front door and greet the two officers who are coming up? And I said, what? Why is that? And she said, we got a 911 call from your location, and so we had to send officers out to investigate. And I said, I live alone. I've been on the phone to her. No, I haven't made any such calls. And she said, well, I said, who called? And she said, it was a silent call, but we still have to go out in case someone's fallen, can't speak, or, Mm-hmm. And so that spoofing my number was one of the dirty tricks that they played on me, even to call the 911 from my location. But I would get calls from people in the middle of the night who were angry. They were saying, you called at 1 or 2 or 3, you kept calling back and waking us up and then slammed the phone down. And it wasn't me, but they were doing this all across the country, just spoofing my phone number. Those were some of the just minor things that they did. So yeah. I had a second book almost completed and decided not to publish it because there were some even more sensitive things disclosed in that book. So
yeah, and for everybody listening, at the time of the Stephenville UFO, Ken was the MUFON state director for Texas. You're also a member of Mensa, and I've known you for years now, Ken. So I take what you say seriously, and we do have a good question in regard to credibility, and that's from Radio. And the question is the credibility level different if a police officer tells of a UFO compared to regular Joe?
Yes, particularly when there are several police officers all reporting the same thing from different vantage points. In other words, independently of one another. So one person's version of something is important, but it's even more credible if it's backed up by two or three people as a group. But then it becomes even more significant when these people are in entirely different locations and report the same thing. So there is no risk of collaboration of the story at that point because, they've all witnessed it independently and are saying the same thing. So, yeah, you would give more credibility to a police officer because they're trained observers. They're looking for evidence of crimes. They're looking for tells that a person might have before they may attack them. So, they have a much greater heightenedness of awareness than the average person would, sure.
Yeah. And we were already kind of going in this direction. The reason why an SUV might consider running you off the road is that you are exposed to information. What did you learn that's going on behind the scenes that the government...
Let's just say in my novel that Blue Book has closed down, Public has, and that a new organization comes on the horizon to track UFOs and UFO stories and investigate stories, and that one of the founders' brother is a CIA career agent. And at the beginning, the very roots of this organization are well, it's well rooted in secrecy. And then let's say that the number of the leading people in this organization have high government clearances and come from various departments, alphabet agencies like the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, military intelligence. And let's say you have even one board member that worked for the patent office. Mm-hmm. So if you want to keep certain inventions or things secret, you need somebody in the patent office, right?
So you need someone on the inside.
Right. Well, in the last I checked, there were over 5,000 patents that were marked, secret for national security purposes. So if you don't want to have a public program anymore, this is a perfect way to go about conducting your business in plain sight. And, I have to say that the CIA has a history of infiltrating and using UFO groups. In the past, they were in the head of the CIA was actually on the board in NICAP. Mm-hmm. And Barry Goldwater's assistant, his aide, who was a CIA, he was a military officer in CIA, was also involved with NICAP. And so these are well-known facts. And so it's not far-fetched to believe that a current organization might be actually doing the bidding of the government and conducting investigations on the side.
Well, maybe it's not directly related, but it is kind of prescient, what you're saying, because, in fact, in 2007, right before the 2008 Stephenville UFO event, AATIP was formed. And so, you're talking about how Blue Book was closed, but not really, because there were still other programs going on. AATIP is a good example of that. And I wonder, were there other programs that we are still not privy to, or maybe there are other undocumented programs? Is it possible to run an unofficial program without paperwork?
Let's say that you're a not-for-profit organization, and for the study of UFOs and extraterrestrials. And
we need more of those.
Your actual only members are the board, who are all hooked in. You're part of this clandestine effort. So there's no, so it's in essence, it's secret, but the organization's activities are public, and it has thousands of members who think that they're members of the group, but they're not. They're really just subscribers to a magazine and volunteers. So, you've got this worldwide network of people who are feeding information into this central hub. Mm-hmm. And then you've got your server off someplace else where no one knows where it is. Think about that for a moment. Mm-hmm. And then all of these cases are coming in, and any sensitive ones get channeled off into a different direction, so that your volunteers never get a chance to actually investigate what they're dreamed of investigating. So one of the things, getting back to the real organization that I was part of, rather than this parallel one I was talking about, one of the things that happened in ours was that many of the tools that I should have had, or that I did have to perform this investigation, were denied to us. And a lot of information was put out in the public to sidetrack not only our investigation, but the public's interest in the case. Our radar specialist was told only to report his findings to the board of MUFON rather than contribute them to the case to me as the lead of the case, mm-hmm. As he was supposed to, and as had always been in the past. So, and then we had spokespersons for MUFON making frequent guest appearances with people who were disseminating fantastic stories that would discredit, really, the work we were doing, seemingly for no purpose. But then I realized later what the whole thing was. So
what was the whole thing?
This was a major, massive case. There was a real UFO. There was a technology here that was of interest to people at the highest levels that they really didn't want in our hands, my team's hands.
Even as an investigator, okay.
Even as the state director where the case was it originated. And so, this was a big deal in the, clandestine world as well. And it rang a lot of people's bells, and I got many calls. It's hard to describe what went on. My phone rang 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for months, with interest from all over the world. And as a result, I also got a lot of interest from people in various agencies who would call or make arrangements to meet or give me material that said, I want to help you out with your investigation. I can't go public, on pain of death, losing my career or my family or something. But so you take the risk.
But how do you know, or how can you trust? How do you decide which source to go with and which not to?
That was a big question for us too, because in the beginning, when I got the first call or so, I thought, well, that's interesting, but it could be a hoax, and we don't have time to go down the rabbit trail. But then as we got more and more sources, it's just like anything else. When you hear a story from so many different people, you might not get a complete intersection, maybe 40 or 50, 60, 80% overlap in the story. Mm-hmm. Somebody telling from a different perspective. But by the time we got 5 or 6 sources who were saying the same thing, it became very, very considerable weight to the story. And so that's the best you can judge anything.
Well, I think we'll leave it there. We're going to come up to this first break. We'll continue on the other side. And, you did send me this article recently about an Israeli company working on life extension and, using oxygen therapy, right?
Yes.
So, essentially saturating the blood and extending the telomeres. And, this reminded you of some insider information you had garnered about development of super soldiers. So we'll talk about that when we get back on the other side of this break. This is Alan B. Smith for Paranormal Now on KGRA Radio. We will be right back.
On and again, the signs keep on coming, they point to the end, but I hold on so tight.
Mainstream media's most wanted. KGRAradio.com.
Lost in a bad way, I've gotta let you go. You're supposed to be so close to me, how mostly it goes to me, yeah. And if you chose to see the most of me, you'd hopefully get close to me, yeah.
Welcome back to Paranormal Now. This is Alan B. Smith. I'm here with Ken Cherry tonight. And taking us out of the break was Septembrio. If you would like Septembrio's music, you can find out more about them at www.septembrio.com. Septembrio spelled with a Y. So, Ken, I am really curious about this super soldier intel that you had garnered. I think it's one of those subjects that the public at large would even quite be willing to accept, because eugenics go way back. And we're all aware of that. So, but what's real and what isn't, I think, is the question, right?
Exactly. Well, it does actually have a tie-in to the UFO and secrecy that we were discussing, because well, as I said, during the investigation that went on for a year, I developed quite a few very interesting sources. Some of them I inherited from Jim Mars, our old conspiracy friend, and people who had been good sources for him throughout the years. One of the sources was career CIA. And she said one of the first assignments she had was to go to Dulce, New Mexico, and was told to stay just to observe. She was a young agent, and report back. And what she saw was a triangular UFO that came down over the mesa, silently, apparently anti-gravity. And then out of nowhere, a number of men in jumpsuits with the cart started servicing this thing, and afterwards it just took off. It turns out that this was by the CIA was spying on a different organization in our own government who was developing this craft. Now, this was back in the mid 70s. And so, people are saying now that they're seeing these TRB-3s and so forth that are, work on some sort of an impulse drive and so forth. But the desire to develop human pilots that can take these craft into the far reaches of space has not stopped along with the development of this technology. And so one of my sources was a member of the medical team who worked with our enhanced soldiers in an enhanced soldier program. Mm-hmm. She said that they could stand at the furthest side of a room and look at an eye chart and see the small print beneath the number, the letters on the chart itself, all the way down at the bottom, "Made in USA" or something.
Sure.
So, eyes of an eagle, they had greater agility, greater healing power. They can hold their breath longer and so forth. But these are all men that are recruited from the best of our Navy SEALs and other special forces who are already, genetically pretty superior. But then they use enhancements to make them even stronger, better, faster. And so I sent you some examples of things that are actually just available if you have enough money now. Mm-hmm. One of them is a artificial lens that you can have implanted that will give you 60/60 vision. That's 3 times better than a person with 20/20.
So that affects distance. Is that what we're speaking of, or?
Yeah. Some number of years ago, there was an incident during Obama's administration where some pirates had kidnapped a ship. Yes. Mm-hmm. and were holding a number of people hostage. And
was that off of Somalia?
Somalia, I believe it was. And one of the pirates came aboard this Navy ship. He was going to negotiate a payment, because these ships do carry a lot of cash with them to pay to pay the soldiers. When I was a Marine, so I forget what the names that I know for Navy guys you can't say on the air. But anyway,
I grew up in a Marine household, so I understand.
Swabbies. We'll go with Swabbies. Anyway, when they come into port, they pay them, they give them money. So anyway, these ships carry a lot of money. So this pirate chieftain thinks he's going to negotiate, this big payment, and he's got 3 of his men holding these hostages on the edge of the boat, and they're in very high seas, the ship's rocking up and down and so forth. So they had 3 of these SEALs lying down off the back of this thing. They're about a mile away in choppy seas, wind conditions, unbelievable, and they took out all 3 of these pirates that were holding these hostages, just dropped them. Now, that's incredible vision. There are fantastic snipers, but then there are superhuman snipers as well. And that kind of precision, in very high seas and turbulent weather, was a result of, some enhancements. And let's face it, our enemies, our competitors in the world are seeking, have been since Nazi Germany to create super soldiers. Why would we sit back? And besides that, as I said, part of this was all developing pilots for some of this technology that we've gotten from other, alien life that require demand more of the pilot than an ordinary human pilot could withstand.
Well, I was going to ask you, technology we do, I think, expect to be about 50 years, 20 years at least in advance with these special access programs that our government has and the military runs. Now, can that also be applied to genetics? I don't know. Those are two very different technologies. How far advanced could they possibly be?
Well, the reason I sent you the oxygen chamber treatment is because this is part of the enhanced soldier program. Is that they are promised that after 25 years of service that they will be reversed in age back to when they began. Bear in mind that they're only used for extremely hazardous missions, and so the survival rate is not that high. But part of it is you get to serve your country, and then you get to be de-aged. And as this medical person told me, some of these soldiers stay in a chamber, much like the apparatus that I sent you an example of, for a week, and said that when they come out, sometimes they have PTSD type like symptoms, but in fact, it does reverse the aging in them by about 25 years. And
that's amazing.
So this is technology we have. And that lens that I sent you and the oxygen chamber that I sent, these are just commercial examples of spin-offs from these programs. A lot of this secret technology finds its way into public use many years after it's already been perfected. Let me interject one thing.
Sure.
The same source was the CIA person. Had a PhD, and she was approached when she had just finished her master's and recruited by the CIA. They said, if you come to work for us, we will set you up in a good job. We'll pay for your PhD. And so she worked for Bell Labs. Mm-hmm. And a lab, she said, that was so secret they couldn't even tell anybody where the parking lot was. It had no windows in the building. But they developed cell phones for our intelligence services long before they were released to the public. So that, again, another example of how the technology is so far advanced for our secret programs.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So it sounds like recovered craft, alien craft. We can back engineer that. Or I guess any technology that the government has or some company has that they don't want the public to know about quite yet, they can slowly disseminate the technological know-how and drip it out little by little so that eventually we get there. But that they want to stay ahead of the game. So this came out November 20th, 2020. A new study from Tel Aviv University and the Shamir Medical Center in Israel indicates that hyperbaric oxygen treatments in healthy aging adults can stop the aging of blood cells and reverse the aging process. In the biological sense, the adult's blood cells actually grow younger as the treatments progress. So this is real. This isn't science fiction.
No, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And some of this, now, this person felt that the original technology that we got was back engineered or given to us, that it was not human developed. But then again, a lot of, Lieutenant Colonel Philip Corso claimed the same thing, that his job was to release into industry a lot of the technology that they had back engineered or found, in some of these retrieve crashes. So there are quite a few people, a NASA scientist that I interviewed actually his claim was that a lot of the top scientists for NASA only collect their paychecks there. That's just the way to pay them. Is that they're on the the checklist with NASA and so forth. But this is before most of the programs shut down. But his real job was to back engineer alien technology. Specifically, you say that specifically. Engines. I mean, that power plants of the UFOs, and part of the problem is that these come from very different types of science that we don't understand some of it. That's why we've been back engineering for so long. Mm-hmm. Is that not all alien technology operates in the same manner.
I have a question from Rodrigo Vieira, and it's, would that medical person be Emery Smith? I don't know if that's the...
No.
And also, are you allowed to share this person's name?
No, thank you.
Okay. Right, and that was part of the struggle.
I will say, though, this person did work with Corey Smith at one point. Corey Good, pardon me. I got a different Corey in mind, but Corey Good, which, there's a whole controversy about Corey, whether he was involved in, different programs where he was taken to Mars and so forth. But
hey, Ken, I have to throw this in for you. We've got a comment. Without the Navy, you wouldn't get to the battleground.
Yeah, there are limo drivers, I guess.
Oh, I knew it was coming. I felt that one. So, but
Ubers.
Well, Cheryl Costa is coming on in a little bit. I wonder if she has something to say about that with her military experience. So here's my question. I guess I know that you had spoken of two different factions, right, that are working both hand in hand and against each other at the same time behind the scenes. Meaning, I believe there's one side that's pushing for sooner disclosure, and one side that is pushing against it, but they're all aware of what's going on.
Right.
And are we in that beginning disclosure?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, what's going on is all part of this whole grand plan. Let's put it that way. There are three factions, in fact. I mean, two human and one is the others. The others who live here in great numbers. And before anybody laughs about that, just remember that, how many dignitaries have gone to Antarctica, Buzz Aldrin, the Pope, I don't know, so many people. I think Buzz was taken out of there in a heart attack, and he was quoted as saying, they're going to kill us all. But, after World War II, we had a mission to go down there to clean out a secret Nazi base, and that's well documented. So apparently there has been a lot of high technology that's been spotted down there. At any rate, so the others live here in large numbers, and they're tired of hiding. Man has explored just about every nook and cranny on Earth, and it's become more and more difficult for them to go unnoticed, and they frankly don't see why they should have to. They are the top of the food chain. So they're anxious for disclosure so that, they can just come out in public. And we have two very strong factions in world government that are afraid that this will affect civilization. It'll be an existential crisis because it could collapse our economies. It could collapse the, energy usages. I mean, free energy and all of the things that this might unleash. So, and plus from the religious aspects of it. Now, the Pope has said there's nothing inconsistent with the belief in extraterrestrial life.
Sure.
And the Christianity, but there are other religions that don't take that same perspective. And so it could set off incredible turmoil. Why pay taxes if we're not the top of the food chain? If our military can't safeguard us from this alien threat. So if one faction wants to be complete disclosure, a benign type thing, and the other says, no, people can't handle it. We have to clamp down on civil liberties. Mm-hmm. And that's where we are now. They're putting all the apparatus in place to, when disclosure comes, that they can clamp down on our civil liberties. They can, they can limit speech. They can limit our rights. They can, they want to take our weapons, and, they want to make people dependent upon the government for as much dependency as possible, so that there's that overhanging threat that will withdraw, your guaranteed income, your welfare check, your, whatever. So that's kind of where we are right now. We're on a 2-track to disclosure. But
isn't that problematic if you have two factions working against each other in a sense? Because yes, you can make maybe those arguments in the real world, but then there are also the counter arguments, and that's probably being pushed by the other side, right? I think it's odd that aliens would even aliens or the others, as you refer to them, would have that much of an issue with us. Because for me, I kind of feel like we are meant to be spacefaring civilization. I like the timing of everything with this. For instance, with privatization of space, it seems like by the time we really are ready to become a spacefaring species, let's say 20 years from now, right. By then the de-aging technology will certainly be far more advanced than it is now, and those things just seem to be riding hand in hand. And then the next for me logical step is space.
You're forgetting the addictiveness of power. Oh. When you say 20 years from now we'll be spacefaring, we are spacefaring now. We've had a secret space program for at least 70 years. I had a very close friend whose father was a big deal in D.C. He had been part of the OSS as a young man and worked with General MacArthur. And during World War II, any number of UFOs were shot down, and he, along with MacArthur and some other aides, went to see some of these crashes and viewed, the crash UFOs and some alien beings and so forth. And so that's kind of how he got into this compartmentalized area of the OSS that became the CIA. As such, as an older man, he was part of a committee that approved the black budgets for some of their, most secret programs. And one year he said they got a request that was just so huge the three of them they couldn't approve it. They just could. And so they had this 4-star general in front of them and said, "Look, General, we don't know where the money's going. This is an enormous amount of money, and there's no oversight. We're not going to approve it until we know where it's going." So he said they took the 3 of them to this enormous hangar. He wouldn't tell me where it was or whatever. But he said they opened a hangar. They went inside, and there were all sizes of what he called flying saucers. And the general turned to them and said, "That's where the money's going." And this was in the mid-'60s. So we had spacefaring craft in the mid-'60s. Now, where do you think we've gone with those things? Just flying around the atmosphere, terrorizing people? No.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that flies in the face a little bit of what Bob Lazar is saying, that they were trying to reverse engineer craft, but perhaps it was just those craft in particular they're reverse engineering.
Well, bear in mind what this scientist that I spoke with from NASA said. He gave a lecture to a very small group of Rosicrucians, who I guess is part of their belief system, in the UFOs and the aliens coming to help us and so forth, all the way back to, the time of the pyramids. I mean, I think that's where the beginning of the Rosicrucian took place. But anyway, he said there are at least 13 different species of aliens visiting the Earth, at any given time on a regular basis. And they all have different types of technology. Some of this is just so advanced we can't, we may never understand it fully.
Ken, I'm going to squeeze in a couple of chat questions here before we go.
Sure.
What is the alien agenda? And maybe we can clarify what you think the others are in that same question.
Yeah, the others that I refer to are these advanced beings who are terrestrials. They're just not humans like us, but they are advanced beings that have lived here on Earth alongside us throughout history. I mean, they have found depictions of UFOs on cave walls. I mean, they didn't have the Sci-Fi Channel. They just drew what they saw.
Right, sure.
And, I mean, they found the Aborigines and all over the world. The Chinese in their writings, the Egyptians, the Indians, the Romans even have reports of UFOs hanging over their battlefields. So,
yeah.
They've been here in advanced technology since the dawn of humankind. And if they were hostile toward us, they could have wiped us out in our infancy. So I think trying to apply good, bad, evil to them is, that's more of a human trait that they don't quite share. It's just, they want.
Well, an agenda itself tends to have a negative connotation, but it really isn't. It could be quite the neutral word. And I guess for them, it's what they just want to live openly. Is that it?
Right.
Okay. And then the last question, Ken, is what books do you recommend people read in regard to this subject from Libertas?
Well, you can read my book.
Check. Okay.
MARC SLADE Investigates the Stephenville UFO. I would say that probably every third page, at least, if not every other page, has an important reveal in it. And
I was just grabbing this off my bookshelf here, so everybody who's watching, that's Ken's book right there.
There you go. There you go.
All right, so Ken, any last words of wisdom before we let you go?
Check on me to make sure I'm still here in a few days.
Okay. Fair enough.
I enjoyed it. It's always a pleasure.
All right, Ken, thank you so much, and have a fantastic night. I'm sure we'll be chatting soon, and as soon as we can get down to Texas again, man, I would absolutely love to, and get outside and spend some time in that open space. I mean, whenever my wife and I go out west, we just love it because that, you come from a city, that open air, big skies, and where you live it's just absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, I have a horse in the front yard, and I've got plenty of trees to hug and fresh air. And,
right.
it's relaxing. It gets, I can't imagine. I loved working on Wall Street back in the 70s. It was a great place, but man, I wouldn't want to live in the city. But more power to you, my friend.
All right, brother. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Ken. All right, we're going to come back on you too. We're going to come back on the other side with Cheryl Costa, co-author of the UFO Desk Reference. And I'm really excited to have Cheryl on. I'm going to ask her a couple of questions and tie this all in together, hopefully. The alien conspiracy, UFOs, and the future of our own humanity. This is Alan B. Smith for Paranormal Now on KGRA. Hang in there. We will be right back.
And you are the sky. I need to swim free, and you need to fly. I live for daylight, you live for the night. You love to wander, and I want to be right, but the sweetness in me.
Mainstream media's most wanted. KGRAradio.com.
I'm a mess, but a hot mess. Learning to love all my indiscretions. I've been going and I don't wanna be found. Go on and I don't wanna be found. I live for the night.
Welcome back, everyone. This is Alan B. Smith for Paranormal Now on KGRA Radio. Taking us out of the break is Lizette Xavier. If you want to find out more about Lizette, you can go to her website, lizetteXavier.com. She has a new single coming out as well on the horizon, so I'll let you know as soon as I find out when that actually drops. And for those of you who are not familiar, Lizette is a partner with Michael Hill, the founder of Septembrio. So all their music goes hand in hand and really help to fill out the show and really bring the mood and like a set and setting, as it were, in the words of Timothy Leary, to the program. All right, so now we're going to bring on Cheryl Costa. Cheryl Costa, welcome once again to Paranormal Now. How are you? Oh,
Boom. There you go.
All right. Gotcha. Hey, but it's better to be safe, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I didn't want you to pick up any random noise here.
Gotcha. All right. So how are you? How's everything?
Things are okay.
Okay. Yeah. It's a little tough.
Okay.
We got to see you, I guess, a few months ago for some social distance filming, which was a pleasure.
That was a blast. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, and it was so nice to meet you and Linda. I really enjoyed that. And in our secret, not so secret documentary, which will be coming out in approximately 9 months. I said 9 months about 3 months ago, but I think you know how these things work. So we'll update the audience on that as we go. But it was our conversation that got me thinking about how the alien extraterrestrial visitation / and or agenda plays into our destiny as humans, as it were. So I think let's start with the more conservative side of the topic, which most people are familiar with, and that's the AATIP program. Mm-hmm. And board, and I'd like to get your take on it, because I don't think you and I have really spoken much about it, and I'd like to hear your point of view.
I'm not an expert on AATIP. Okay. Mm-hmm. I know the high, I've had a couple conversations with Lou Alessandro. Mm-hmm. Okay. And his conversation pretty much confirmed what former Senator Reid said. Lou had a hell of a time trying to communicate up the chain of command. Anybody that's ever worked in a corporate establishment knows that the guy who can really fix something is probably several management levels above you, and everybody wants to put their own little code that passes up the chain of command. Mm-hmm. I've had bosses in the past at the high executive level, 4 or 5 levels up, that had an attitude: I don't want to hear any bad news. Okay. A good example, President Trump doesn't want to hear any bad news. Anybody brings any bad news, heads roll, mm-hmm. And that was problematic when you're trying to solve a problem, and the only person who could really put the resources in place to fix the problem was at that higher level, but he doesn't want to hear any bad. That was a typical problem. Well, Lou told me he had a similar problem trying to get it up the chain of command. Mm-hmm. And then later we found out he wouldn't go into deep specifics, but I heard more listening to former Senator Reid, mm-hmm. that there was a highly religious element there in the Pentagon that thought that if we open up this whole thing and have open contact with the off-worlders, that they were the minions of Satan.
It was Dominion to Satan.
Minions of Satan.
Oh, minions of Satan. Okay.
Yeah, or what was the term? I got the term from Nick Pope. The exact term was from a piece in the Bible talking about the prince of the air, the evil prince of the air.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So bureaucracy, is that really the?
It's 2 levels. It's bureaucracy. And then there's a fundamentalism. What's a better term? I don't want to say saturated, but tainted into the level of the bureaucracy. Okay, certain people in entrenched bureaucratic power, so to speak, that have this belief that touching those guys is opening the door to contact with demons. Okay, and it's hard to fight that.
Well, how much
now? Okay, another viewpoint. Okay, Buddhist monastery life. Okay, Buddha taught us that there were realms of existence. Okay, and there's the ghost realms, there's the human realms, there's the animal realms. Okay, there are the hell realms. Okay, and there was also the celestial being realms, the angry God realms, and the long life God realms. Okay, now a lot of people look at that celestial being one and think it's like the angels or something.
Right.
When I was in the monastery, I kind of brought a flavor to it. As celestial beings, that doesn't sound like the angels. That sounds like the off-worlders. And I sort of got some confirmation very quietly from some of the lamas I worked with that plenty of off-worlders have visited here and have taken an interest to us. That's it. So different religions have had a different way of touching it. I guess in the Middle Eastern religions, I think.
Hey, Cheryl,
or the jinn.
Cheryl, we're getting some connection interruptions. Could you give it a try and refresh your browser and see if that helps with? All right, stand by, everybody. We're just going to see if we can get Cheryl's connection solid. Now, I do know that she is on a landline. She is not using Wi-Fi, so the connection should be fine. It might just be a little glitch here. Okay. Sounds great so far. All right, go ahead.
Well, it was on for an hour, so different religions had different ways of talking about those guys.
Right.
And and there's never really been a comfortable way of talking about them in the Christian Judeo faith.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean to insult anybody, but from my view, I'm a pagan priestess. Yahweh, the god Yahweh, is a Middle Eastern desert deity.
Mm-hmm.
And people say, well, do you people believe in God? And I said, hey, I'm a pagan priestess. We got gods by the bushel. And my Hindu friends have got 33 million of them, and they taught us that also in the monastery, that you had the angry God realms, and you also had the long life God realms, the green Taras and the Isis, and those were in long life God realms. And then you've got all the cranky warring gods in the angry God realms. And I very frequently try to tell people Yahweh is in that crowd because if you read the Bible, a lot of people say, well, sweetness and light, but you go in there, there's a lot of verses in the Bible. It's, I'm a God of I'm a wrathful God,
right, yeah.
I'm a God of war, that kind of thing. And that tells you exactly who he is.
Well, I think a lot of people still struggle with that, right? I think, growing up Catholic, I struggle with that as well. I think a lot of people who are Christians.
I grew up Catholic too, so I resonate with you.
Right, yeah, and if you're raised Christian, I think it's easier for you to kind of just ignore some of that in the Old Testament and focus on the message of Jesus. But otherwise, if you're Jewish or Muslim, then you don't really have that. Even though Jesus is a prophet in the faith of Islam, it's a challenge. How do you reconcile that contradiction?
Well, for me, the reconciliation was the fact that I was born clairvoyant, like a lot of people in my family. And most of us, if we embrace the gift, a lot of people in my family didn't embrace the gift, believe me. They ran and hid from it. But those of us who embraced it are very clearly aware of a much bigger world around us. And in the Christian faith says they're handed down, book and script, don't deal with it. Okay. They do not address the fact that there is a bigger world. They have a very, very nice little comfortable fairy tale that they tell you that partly tells you the story, but doesn't tell you the whole story. And that was one of the things that drove me away from my Catholic roots. Okay. And some people say, well, you went around looking for a religion that resonated with how you felt. Well, yeah, that's exactly what I did. I went around until I found, when I was in the Air Force, I was in the Air Force for two years, and I was in the Navy for the better part of almost 8 years, something like that. Mm-hmm. And when I was in the Air Force, I was down in Texas. I made a point of, I'd already walked away from the Catholic faith. I made a point of going to church with everybody in the barracks who went someplace, with the more tent revivals than you can shake a stick at, more river baptisms, and I had a good dose of everybody. And my first real dose of something other than that came when I was in Vietnam. And I had some Native American friends, and they quickly figured out that I had this other sight. Mm-hmm. And in fact, my nickname for me was Airman Two Souls. Now, they wouldn't tell me what the Two Souls part was. Right. It was many years later that I found out what that was. But I asked them, what does that mean? So Coyote will tell you about it someday. I'm going, okay.
Oh, Coyote, sure.
But the thing was, they understood it. We had many quiet esoteric talks. Okay. And, because there was a lot of boredom. You'd had your 12-hour a day job there, but there's other 12-hour days, and you don't always sleep 12 hours, Right. So there was time to talk about these things. And it put me on a different path when I came back from overseas. I was a mess when I came back, but a lot of people were. And it took me a while to get my act together and do some more exploring, and that's where it went. But the bottom line is, I think the real education on this, especially in terms of ET, and I've been looking at the ET topic matter and UFOs since I was 12. And the only thing that made sense was when I started looking at how the Buddhist pantheon was talked about. And we talked about where the gods sit in the things and ghosts. And hey, you and I had long talks about the paranormal. Okay. And there's a term called hungry ghost. And a lot of people who are said to be haunting something are grasping something. So they tend to stay here on this plane. And it's a hungry ghost. Mm-hmm. And so you look at all that, it all made sense. And here's this little realm parked out here on this wheel. Celestial beings. I said, that's got to be the off-worlders.
Yeah, it's such a big, broad, and term open for interpretation, right? It's not so specific that you can't say, you can't argue otherwise. So it makes sense to me that it's something that they didn't understand. And so you call it celestial beings because that's where they came from, right? Yeah. You didn't, when you name someone something, and you describe what their duties are, I think it makes it easier to understand them. So what are these celestial beings? What do they do?
They come, if you go into other mythologies, Apollo went around teaching people stuff. Okay. He's credited with teaching various stuff to various cultures. And not only in Greece, but like supposedly up with the Norse, that type of thing. There's other cultures that said, they came down, they taught us how to culture crops and all this other things. So, look at the impact they had on them, had on whoever was the people who built the Nazca lines, they drew the Nazca lines out there, come back, So, I think our early ancestors were very much like the cargo cults. Okay, after World War II, people that had never seen modern civilization, we started landing bombers and CBs there to build air runways and things like this. And then at the end of the war, they all went away, And what did the cargo cult do? They start building bamboo airplanes and hoping that the gods will come back, So I think our ancient ancestors acted something like that as well.
Well, you heard Ken Cherry in the first hour speaking in terms of what he calls the others. I guess out of preference to not say extraterrestrial because he believes they live here.
Okay.
Are those the same?
Let's go. Yes, let's go there for a moment. There's a great line out of the one Star Trek movie, the one with the whales. Okay,
4, I think.
I think it was Star Trek 4, right? Yeah. And there was a great line there, and I think it was from Spock's father was talking to one of the Starfleet head people there. It was something to the effect that it's absurd that you think that you're the only intelligent life on this planet.
Right.
And that really rings solid.
That was really a powerful film. I mean, I saw that when I was younger, and it was quite. And see, that's what I miss about old Star Trek. It was very thought provoking and very philosophical, and so it did challenge your mind to think, oh, what is intelligence? How important are we? Also, one of my favorite and most funniest scenes in all of Star Trek is Scotty picking up the mouse of the computer and saying, computer. That was fantastic.
Oh, quaint.
Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Look at this mythology, though. Look at our modern mythology.
Right.
How it ties things together. Roddenberry was a genius in that regard. And I'm actually very delighted that they're developing an episodic series now based around Captain Pike. I think it's going to be a fantastic series, But, okay, let's talk about the other intelligent life here. If you are in the remote viewing world and you talk to Dr. Courtney Brown, he'll tell you that the civilization that still exists on Mars, that is in a dire situation. There's some of them living here on Earth underneath some mountains in the Southwest. I've been hearing that since the late 90s, from Dr. Courtney Brown and his people, and so there's that. I've had many other people say, they walk among us on the street. Some of them look so human you wouldn't know them from anybody else.
Is that the same as lizard people, or is that completely different?
That's different. Okay, that's different. There are some that are humanoid, or mostly humanoid. I've heard. I had one guy I knew in D.C. and he said they could be sitting next to you on the subway. Okay. And so it's kind of like the line from the original Men in Black. Pretty good folks. They just want to have a quiet life and a job,
Right. And at the post office.
Yeah, exactly. So there's that. I've talked to a number of researchers that have all the ones I know. Oh, Lorraine Fenton will tell you. She's got some good stories to tell you about women that she's met that have interesting relationships with reptilian males. So, you can believe it or not believe it, but I've heard those stories from a lot of different quarters over the years. And so I think there's, when there's smoke, there's got to be a little bit of fire there someplace. There have been a reptilian species that's been on this planet for eons, but they live underground and they're humanoid.
Right, and so the humanoid factor seems to be a common thread here between these different beings, including us.
True. Now, who are these folks that live in Antarctica? There's a zone there that they don't allow military aircraft to fly over. They're forbidden to fly over it. Okay, and there was an emergency rescue a number of years ago, and the guys that felt the difference between flying over it and getting this guy to someplace to save his life. It was a medevac type of thing. So they flew over it, and they got chewed out thoroughly and sworn to secrecy and had to sign papers that that they didn't fly over it. What is so bloody secret out there in the South Pole snow? There's something going on there. And again, we have the stories from, Admiral Byrd and his people there in World War II, post World War II. So there's something going on. Yeah, I've heard I didn't know what Mr. Cherry was talking about the fact that there's two factions, but it makes complete sense from some things that Steve Bassett has told me over the years, that there's really been a great pressure to really get it out. It's a secret that's been kept too long, and put it in this context. Anybody who's been divorced out there will appreciate this. When something comes up in the situation, and you told me about that. What else have you been lying about? Okay,
sure.
And there's that whole credibility factor that they're going to have to come clean and take a credibility hit. So when they come clean, they're going to have to come with the goods. Now, remember the old fear I used to hear a couple of years ago? Oh, they won't give us disclosure. It'll destroy oil. I'm sorry, COVID destroyed oil. That's not a worry.
And it's already. I mean, science and invention has destined oil to fade away eventually. It's happening. You can't stop the technological progress. So eventually we won't be reliant on it, whether we have 0 point energy or whatever else in its place. So I think that seems rather silly to think that, oh my gosh, the whole world economy is going to collapse.
Three things have come about. Okay, we know solar is going to be a good interim solution. Sure. Hydrogen is going to be a big interim solution. We're seeing wind power farms going up everywhere.
Yeah, surprising, right?
And somebody's putting money into it, because there's one about 30 miles down the road from here, and we've literally sat out at an ice cream stand out in the middle on a farm road kind of thing, and we sat there eating our ice cream cones. There's like 30 or 40 of these things up there on a hill. And suddenly you would see a couple of them shut down. They're being controlled remotely. Whenever the load was needed, they ran them. When they didn't need them, you saw them break them down to a stop, and change the pitch of the blades and things, and all you had to do was just sit there and watch them for an hour, and you could see that kind of activity. So there's, I remember hearing something from Rush Limbaugh one afternoon saying that this wind power stuff is destroying oil, and good. Okay. Solar. I'm of the belief we should pass kind of call it an ordinance or whatever. Think every roof that domestic housing roof that faces south should have solar cells on it. It should be put there by some kind of consortium, and maybe you get a royalty for the fact that it's on your roof or something like this. Yeah. But if we did a thing like that, we'd have more power than we know what to do with.
Well, my wife and I have said it's practically a sin in New York how many empty, unused rooftops there are in apartment buildings, like all over. Yeah. It's unbelievable. I mean, if you're not going to put solar panels, at least put grass, put something up there, But if you take a bird's eye view of areas in Queens and Brooklyn and even Manhattan, there's so much, landscape that can be used for all of these, more passive energy systems. Or even just putting grass on your roof helps with energy, preservation.
Okay, something I learned in the monastery, and I apply it to my Wiccan students. Okay, think big, think really big. Okay, and the idea is that we have had a lot of people that everything we're trying to do right now. Well, hell, let me go back a step. President Carter was in the White House, okay? Did you know during Carter's administration, remember, this guy was a nuclear engineer, okay? I was a nuclear submarine, so I kind of resonated with the guy, okay? And he had a 35, 40 kilowatt solar array on the top of the White House. Reagan came in, no one got sworn in. He said, get that piece of crap off the White House.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So there's this political thing there. We can't have this alternative energy. Right?
Yeah. It's political, but sometimes I really do think it's just limited vision as well.
It is. It is. There's a current edition of a National Geographic type magazine, and they did the article on robotics. And one of the big banners on one of the pages is, this isn't 20 years from now. This is happening now.
I know, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they show all these pictures of all these medical robots going around checking in on people in the wards. In Japan, the calculators that we had in the mid 70s, I saw in the early 70s in Japan. Okay. We didn't have them here in the States until about 75 or 76, but they had them in Japan in 72. I saw them there.
Yeah, there's a cultural obsession in Japan with technology, and I think that helps drive that. I don't know if we don't have that same kind of, zeitgeist here.
Well, you know something, for all the innovation we Americans are credited with, it comes from very few people when you think about it. And innovation is beat out of people. Okay. I read an article a number of years ago about certain kind of robotics we were doing in factories, and they were doing in Japan at the time. And one of the executives said, well, we could have done that 15 years ago, but they didn't. Okay. And we see this a lot where we could have done something, but we didn't, because they were trying to pinch every bit of profit out of something. Why innovate, Right. Look what it's done to us by not innovating.
But if there are ET craft that we can reverse engineer or garner, technology from, is it going to be too late? Are we going to just, be there on our own anyway by the time whoever these people are, whoever the secret holders are, release this information?
No, I think the stuff they've got is far more advanced. Amazing stuff.
Are you talking like decades advanced, 200 years advanced? Do we have any idea?
Well, okay, it's just like our normal technology. We've got this is coming from a former Lockheed employee. We got stuff in the desert that represents the next 40 or 50 years worth of aviation. Okay, that's what we've developed. Remember, we went from horse and buggy to the moon in 60 years.
It's amazing. It's astonishing. Yeah.
But von Braun said we had help.
Well, I was going to ask you this too, because throughout history, Tesla, Einstein, the way they describe how they visualize or receive information, especially Tesla, he's much more open about it. I think Einstein kind of inferred it was more of like a consciousness or a God kind of thing, but Tesla, it was like there was beings, someone was speaking to him and giving him these ideas. Is that our imagination helping us manifest ideas, or are there literally others?
That's
something
our spark of consciousness, which is not separate from all the consciousness, the force of the universe. Okay, that is being able to look past this reality and connect with that greater universal consciousness where all the knowledge is known, and it goes that way. I teach my students now. I teach my students remote viewing, and a lot of them say, well, nobody else in this, like in Wicked, teaches remote viewing. I said, I'm trying to teach you how to connect to the great consciousness, because when you try to do things like magical manifestation, it's all about being connected in the first place. And no amount of burning incense and waving wands is going to do anything, but being connected to all that is going to do that.
Yeah.
Again, the mentality has to be imagine big, think really big.
Have you had a chance to see the documentary Superhuman?
No, I have not seen it yet.
It's interesting. And it seems that they're documenting on camera. And I spoke with Caroline Corey, who produced and, wrote and started as it were. And it seems like they're on camera replicating telekinesis, and remote viewing. I'll let the audience decide whether they want to believe what they see or not, but it is fascinating. And one has to wonder, yes, let's say we do become a spacefaring society. We will have to have more efficient ways of communication, unless we're going to send every text message, through, some kind of space warp. If we can connect from mind to mind, is that where we're headed? Is that even possible? If we're so far apart from each other, millions of light years away.
When I was on board submarine, we had a guy. We were radio silent. We could get our message. We'd go up periscope depth, put the periscope up, let one of our long wires out, and we could take scheduled transmissions to us, but it was one way. Okay. Literally, when we were on station, we took the fuses out of the transmission equipment, so there was no chance anybody could transmit. Okay, that's how radio silent we were. And we had a guy get violently sick, and the medic made the comment, "This is, if I didn't know better, I would swear he's in labor." Okay. All right. When we finally did get up on the skid, about 12 hours later, schedules is what we call a skid. Okay. When we got the skid, there was a transmission in there indicating that his wife had gone into labor for like 18 hours, which is about how long Tom was down, and she had a beautiful bouncing baby boy. Okay, it was a difficult labor, and when we made adjustments for the time differences where we were versus where she was, sure, it synced up tremendously. I've known married couples that if one broke, again, while we were in the military, we were deployed, the wife broke her arm and his arm swelled up.
Well, okay? that happens to me. If my wife, if some part of her body hurts, I'll kind of feel it, but I don't know. Like very subtly, like I'll feel something. I don't know if that's me, manifesting it, or if it's a connection.
It's a connection. Remember, you're all part of the same soup. Okay, this is just a chicken soup we get to wear so we can play, but we're all part of the same cosmic soup, right. Consciousness, and the perception that we are singular, that we're separate from it, is just that. It is an illusion. We are not separate from it. It's not out there. It's in here. Okay. And that's what a lot of people miss. They keep thinking it's out there someplace. It's in here. And that tiny little voice you hear, that thing, that gut feeling you get, that is your connection to the universe. And it is powerful if you take the time to quiet your mind and not play with all the distractions, the little phones and all this stuff. And you get away from all of that and start quieting yourself. A couple, 2 or 3 minutes a day meditation. It may seem hard, but if you tinker at it, you can do it. Everybody can do it. Once you start quieting yourself, it's amazing what you can do. And didn't Einstein tell us, and of course Tesla knew this too, the idea of the thought experiments? Einstein made a really great conversation about this. He was talking about, I guess, what the New Agers might call the Akashic Records. He says, mentally, I have walked into a library and I may have pulled off one book and I've managed to come up with some formulas. How many things can we pull off the shelves and look at? Okay. And it's the truth. Some of the monks that I worked with, including myself, were directed by the Lama to meditate on certain subject matter. And the next thing you know, we knew all about it. Did we open a book? No, but we knew all about it. It was like it was downloaded. Now, did we consciously know it was downloaded? No, but one day somebody asked you a question and you knew the answer. It fills the answer. I had one of my students one day. I said, after about a couple of months of meditation, ask a question. Just mentally ask a question. He came back to me a couple of days later. He says, it was like it filled my head. And I said, there you go. Okay. It is possible. Now, there's a lot of people in the UFO community. They're all very hardware oriented. We got to confirm all this stuff with radios and technology and big scope, big antennas in the desert and things like this. Mm-hmm. The consciousness people are saying, we're already doing it, guys.
But how far can we extrapolate this, right? So if our minds can take us to other minds, can we actually change our position? Can we change reality itself? Explain that.
Explain where you're going with that. I got an answer, but I want to make sure that's what you ask.
Well, okay. So if I'm able to connect with you, let's say, right, and send some kind of imagery, psychic messaging, whatever it might be, I'm clearly using the structure of space-time. It's allowing me to do that, right? So why couldn't I also manipulate or use, manipulate's probably not the best word, but utilize the construct of reality and change it so that I can literally move through space-time? If my thoughts can. Right? Or should I be living with shamans on the beach in Hawaii somewhere?
Yeah. No, think of it this way. All of this, one of the first things they teach in the monastery, all of this, knock on your table, whatever you want to do, all of this is an illusion. Okay? One of the things we teach young Wiccan students is reality is malleable. It's flexible. It can be bent. Okay? Okay, now you get up into the Lama level, the deep, heavy mystics, the guys I studied with, and there's people way beyond me. Okay. When you study with the mystics, one of the best guys one of the better guys made a comment about it. He wrote, he's an American who translated the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Thurman is his last name. I don't remember his first name. Robert Thurman, I believe it is. The actress's father, Thurman. He made a comment that the serious mystics get down to a certain level where they can quite literally, and this is the words he used, play with the machine code of reality. Okay.
So are we hacking?
Yeah. Reality hacking. Reality. Okay. So I teach a magical student. You can make changes. Okay. Subtle changes, but I also tell them, be careful what you ask for. Okay. You may not like the results. But the deal is reality can be changed. Okay. I have a demonstration I sometimes do with people where I'll take a penny and I'll put it between my fingers. I concentrate on it, and then I'll take one finger away and the penny will sit right there. Okay. And they think it's a trick. And that's the problem. Too many people think that anything that's been done with a mystical force is just some cheap parlor trick. And it's not. We're sitting there defying physics. And I have seen things in the monastery that completely defy classic physics. And I was trained heavily in physics in the Navy,
I've seen things on mushroom trips that completely defy physics.
The thing is, the mushroom trips are probably closer to the real reality than the crap we see around us.
Well, I had this one experience where I was trying to play something on my iPod. There's like the old iPods, years ago. And every time I tried to play a song, this other song, it was based on Alice in Wonderland. And it was extraordinarily trippy in its design. And it kept popping up, and I was like, what is going on? Because it was a very low level shroom trip. And so I had my camera, I put my camera on the iPod to show that like I did this, and I documented it, that it happened. It never happened before, never happened after, only during that moment in time. And what is that? Because it seems to me that sometimes reality is trying to speak to us, or maybe we're just peeling the veil. I'm not sure what it is, but I feel like something was trying to say something there.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you.
But it seems so chaotic or random, I should say. So how do we harness this latent ability of ours? If it does seem you need to be in a deep state of meditation, or it's random when you're conscious, or whatever it is.
It's okay. Let me go back to remote viewing in a minute. Okay. The best people. Okay. You give me a class for like a 4-day crash course on all day crash course on remote viewing for 3 or 4 days over a holiday weekend. Okay. I can get a room full of artists and musicians up to speed by the second day with a certain, elementary level of remote viewing with a high degree of success. Okay. Mm-hmm. To get a classroom of engineers or mathematicians to that same level would take 2 to 3 weeks. Okay. Right now, if someone said we need to have a team of remote viewers trained from scratch, I would say go to a music department at a local college. I would like, that's what I need right now.
Yeah.
Okay. Because their head is already programmed a certain way. They're very right brain oriented already. Okay. Mm-hmm. The moment you start trying to teach the engineers the, Charles Schmar, that's a good statement. Thank you. Unique moments might just grab our attention. Yes, absolutely. I agree with you. The engineers start to do the structured process of the remote viewing, and then suddenly they drop out of the zone. They go into conceptual mind thinking, and they fall out of the mystical zone. They go into conceptual mind thinking and saying, now, how is this working? Instead of just letting it be. Mm-hmm. Okay. And you get the artists together and they just go with the flow, And we discovered in one of the classes that I was doing a refresher class. I was a student myself. Sure. This is back in around 2003. I was running a small monastery up in upstate New York. Well, it's not a big place. It was like a ranch house. Okay. But I was running it to be a Buddhist center, and at the request of my order. And the Farsight people, Dr. Courtney Brown's people, were trying to get a class in New York State, but they kept trying to do it in New York City, and the room rates are like $400 a night, and it was ridiculous. I said, look, I can get your room rates of $50 a night up here, up in upstate New York, and I'll let you use the space of the monastery for free if you just let me take the course for free too. And they said, sure, we'll be right up. And that's exactly what they did. But the deal was, when we got with all these artists, they just went with the flow. But we went to a target. We went to a particular target, say the moon. One person resonated with the landscape. Another one resonated with with some of the coarseness of the place. Okay. Somebody else, I resonate with the living being that was there. Okay. And each of us resonated. Well, we found out that if the best kind of remote viewing was not to just do it with one person, and it's a structured data mining is what it is. Instead of doing it with one person, why not do 4 or 5 people, but pick the people who have a particular knack for a particular thing. Some people were good at sensing the energetics. Some people were good at detecting life forms, that type of thing. And it was an amazing experience working with, quote, a remote viewing away team, so to speak.
Right. Now, is this what Stephen Greer is doing with his CE5?
Mm-hmm. In a way, yeah. Yeah, I'm very, very pro CE5. Back when I was writing my newspaper column, I wrote 3-4 good articles about CE5, encourage people if they were really interested that this is an approach. I wrote a couple of the articles for CE5 saying, hey, if you're doing your meditation, don't go to the session and have a pepperoni pizza, that kind of thing, because the gas and everything affects your meditation. So I gave advice like that based on stuff we learned in the monastery of certain food restrictions when you're doing heavy meditation.
Okay. Yeah, so don't have a bowl of ice cream before you meditate.
No, ice cream would be fine. It's the garlics, really? It's the onions, it's the pepperoni, anything spicy that can be gassy, that kind of thing.
Wow, okay.
Not turnips.
Beans?
No, beans. Yeah, beans for one. The other one was cauliflower. It's very gassy. Okay.
Okay.
And I had a little laundry list. These are the things you don't want to eat the day before a CE5 session because you're going to be doing meditation.
I would have never thought about that. Yeah.
Okay. And it can't be just meditation for the CE5. You've got to kind of get into a routine of doing a little bit every day. Now, some come to me and say, well, I don't have hours to spend in a monastery. No. Give me 2 minutes during your lunch hour at your desk. Just mute your screen, close your eyes for a couple of minutes, and just relax for 2 minutes. Okay. If you want to set the timer on your phone, fine. Okay. Whatever you want, but give yourself 2 minutes. If you can't get peace in your office, close the door in the restroom and do it on the throne if you have to. Mm-hmm. Okay. But if you do it 2 minutes a day for, say, a month or two, at the end of a month or two, do 2 minutes in the morning, do 2 minutes in the evening, and then maybe start expanding it out to 3, 4, or 5 minutes. But don't try and sit there and do the American macho thing of, I want to do it for an hour. Those Asian guys can do it. I can do it. They've been trained to do it since they were 7. You're not going to do it in a week.
And they started off in small bits.
Yeah, everybody has to start in small bits.
Right. Yeah.
I was in a monastery for 7 years. The best I ever mastered was about 45 minutes. 45 minutes was the best I ever. These days, I can do 20 easily, but my daily routine is 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes at lunchtime, 5 minutes late in the afternoon. That's it. That's my routine. It keeps me in it, and I can still go amazing places.
I have a question from Deborah McGavin.
Sure.
Are you familiar with Lynn Buchanan's 2015 predictions? He was on Earth Files October 21 with Linda Moulton Howe.
No.
Okay. Neither of us are familiar. If you want to give us some more information, Deborah, in the messaging to help us out with that would be great.
There's one thing with predictions, okay? They may be accurate right now when we get the perception of them, but remember the future is still very fluid, and it can change. You know, I used to tell people, your future or what we've shown you that might happen in the next week or two may change 5 minutes after you walk out of this tarot card reading. Okay, it's very, very malleable. Now, some things are going on a deeper current. You know, maybe for all of us, like this whole COVID thing. Okay. Give you an example. Back months before 9/11, the folks in the Burmese monastery where I was living, we started having conversations over supper. You know, something's getting ready to happen. Can you feel it? Yeah. You know, smoke and fire and, you know, people screaming, you know, and that was the sense. And we were talking about it 6 months before. Most everybody at the table said they'd been getting images and flashes of it as much as 6 months prior to that. So up to about a year. Now, there have been scientists who've done things that said that people started researching the trade towers in 72 hours before the thing. Massive amounts of people on the internet were researching the Twin Towers 2 or 3 days before the event.
Right.
So that again, that's that connection we all have, and very devastating events in the near future kind of echo back.
See, this is where I get confused, because if there are other intelligences, sentient beings living among us here on Earth or off world, wouldn't it make sense that they help us evolve, to help, you know, say, hey, you know, you can really expand your brains and do amazing things and get us more into a united, empathetic, you know, state of mind where we can work better together in more unison?
They have.
Or is that a pipe dream?
No, they have. Buried on one of my computer disks someplace, one of the ones from an older computer, I have a wall painting from one of those hilltop monasteries in Ethiopia.
Okay.
And they had paintings of all the sacred sages that had taught their order over many hundreds and thousands of years. And one of the paintings that caught my eye was one of robed, biblical style robes, okay, reptilian, who was a great teacher who came among them and taught them things.
But how much do you believe that?
It's in a monastery. I tend to believe that.
Okay.
They had pictures of every sage they'd ever had over many centuries, and here's this one guy. And I did some research on it. Right,
and then that kind of brings us back to what we were speaking of earlier, with the snake in the garden. Is the snake actually someone who's just simply telling you the truth? And there's actually...
I refer to the snake as Zudi.
Okay, Zudi.
Okay, right. And Zudi basically said... wake up.
Right.
That's what Buddha taught us to do too. Wake up.
But it seems like they were in a good place. So why wake up from that?
Yeah. So is my dog running around out in the backyard. He's in a good place too. He gets fed 3 squares a day, but what happens if Zudi comes along and said, wake up, you can be like the gods yourself? And I tell my students, you can be like the gods yourself because you're made of the same stuff they are. They're just karmically further up the chain than you are.
Right. So that's what it is. It's the next level. And that's what I'm, wondering is there a quicker way to get to that next level? Or will it always be?
If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. That is a quote from my Lama.
But and you spoke of thinking big earlier. Right, yes. And you spoke of thinking big earlier, so we can think big in those metaphysical terms.
Yes,
but also we can think big in the real world terms. And I think that Elon Musk is one of those big thinkers. He even made a comment about aliens and the Great Pyramids, and Zahi Hawass freaked out on him in public media. But it makes me wonder: someone who is very smart, a visionary, a big thinker, to make a comment associating extraterrestrials and the Great Pyramid seems either, he's just speculating or he knows something that we don't. Is that possible? Or do you think he's more on the
deep connections? I suspect he knows more than he's telling us.
Right. And he's making leaps. Right, he's trying to get us to space.
Who's the guy? Who's the guy that was on 60 Minutes? He has the alien painted on the outside of his research facility out in Nevada.
George Harris, is that it?
No, I can't remember the guy's name. Okay. But he gets on 60 Minutes, and they said, "Well, you believe in aliens?" He says, "Look around you; they're around us all the time." And I saw that 60 Minutes, and says, "Yeah, this guy gets it." They're around us all the time. But let me give you a flavor, though.
Sure.
One of the things that we taught in monastery is that we have a little problem of tunnel vision with our view of reality. Okay. All right. I was in 3rd grade. Kid in our class, our Catholic school class's dad died of a burst appendix about 3 weeks before. Okay. Mm-hmm. And finally, the kids come back to school. And one of the kids during our religion session class in the morning asked the nun, well, so what happened to his father? And the nun very politely said, well, he's in heaven with God. Clairvoyant kid is sitting here looking over there, looking at his dad sitting on a cabinet, smiling at his son. Okay. The clairvoyant people that run around, and there's a lot of them running around that are naturally gifted. We see a little bit wider. I'm trying to get this proportion for your screen, a little wider reality. Okay. And the deal is with the reality is that too many of us only see what we want. How many people walk down the street and don't see that guy sitting there holding a cup out looking for donations? They don't even see him. Okay. And that's the problem. We filter out what we want to see, or we paint our own reality in our head. You got people right now who do not believe the election, that Biden won the election, because they've bought into a narrative. Okay. And there's people out there who buy into a narrative that everything is just this nuts and bolts things we can see. And there's a lot more going on around us. And yes, they walk among us. Some of them are just outside. Hey, I'll give it to you in this way. How many people started noticing when we got cell phones? They would take a picture of the kids and the dog and everything, and then they'd look at the picture, and there'd be the UFO parked out there on the horizon, because the phone could see down into the infrared range where your normal eye couldn't. There was that guy out in Colorado who used time-lapse photography, and he was noting that something comes down every day about 1:00, regularly scheduled flight, so to speak. Right? There's things that happen outside of our perceptual view of our hearing range and our optical range. And sometimes the only way we can see it is with our heart, as they say.
Right. And that's something that we should always work on, because you're right. We can't always rely on tech, but if we are our own tech, then they're at an advantage. Now, I'm telling you, Cheryl, I am waiting for that next big UFO event, because not only do we have smartphones with not just, like those old flip phone cameras. Remember how bad they were? It was like this little tiny screen. We have really good lenses in smartphones now. And we also have a plethora of YouTubers who go a step beyond those cell phones, right? They have, good cameras with, 24, 40 millimeter lenses and
mounted on the phone. Yeah.
yeah. And then, there's so many people with cameras. If we had another, like we spoke with Ken in the first hour, another Stephenville event, another, Phoenix event, do you think that we'll actually be able to prove once and for all? We'll get enough collective imagery.
Maybe. There's been so much fake stuff put out there. Some of the best pictures that have ever been taken of UFOs were taken on film. Okay, by chance. And I've had a couple of really, really great sighting experiences. And people say, why didn't you take a picture of your phone? One, it was in my pocket. I don't live on my phone, so it was literally turned off. The event happened so fast, even if I had had it in my hand, by the time I had brought the app up to take the picture, it would have been gone. Mm-hmm. Most of the time, it's like that.
Yeah.
And
so we only have a couple minutes left, so I have to ask you, where are we headed as a species? Are we being shepherded by these other beings?
I think so. I truly believe we are being shepherded, and I truly do believe that. And they've touched people like Einstein. They've touched people like Tesla. They are touching some of our greater minds now. They're touching some of our greater artists now. We'll see. But, give you an example. I do UFO statistics. Mm-hmm. I share some of the statistics in some of the Facebook groups, and people tell me I'm crazy. Okay, but numbers don't lie, but they tell me I'm crazy.
Well, I think when they say crazy, it's also their way of saying I find it hard to believe, right? And I find that in most cases people aren't doing the homework.
No, that's right. There's a lot of people who just want they come into the UFO groups and they want an answer. Are they here? But they aren't willing to talk about what things are. I'll give you a flavor. Right now, up to the first 18 years of the 21st century here, we had 146,800 reported sightings between MUFON and New Fork. Okay, I've got that in my database through 2018. Right now, depending upon where 2020 finishes up, and we've had a hot year. Okay, my model is suggesting we're going to have upwards of 168,000, maybe 170,000 in that database by that time. Yeah. Okay, so now a lot of people tell me 30%. No, they can't be real. 10%'s real. I did a poll recently, one group, and overwhelmingly people said 10% are probably the exotic stuff. So, okay, based on that new number, if you divide it by 20 years, it gives us 842 per year. You divide that by 12 months, that gives us 70. You divide that, and basically what the numbers work out to is we for the last 20 years we've had 14 exotic events in the United States per week. Okay, that's what it comes down to, and it's only takes one. So that's where we're at. And we're working. Our new book will be out probably second quarter of next year. We're calling it Project Pink Book. There was Project Blue Book. Well, ours is Pink Book. We got two old broads doing it, and we're putting it together. It'll be a snapshot of 20 years worth of UFO sightings based on both databases. And we'll have charts in there that weren't available for the first book. And it should be pretty cool. And by the way, it's going to be nice pink. It's going to be very nicely pink.
It's going to stand out on the bookshelf.
Well, it's going to stand on a bookshelf, perhaps on a congressman's desk, during congressional hearings, that kind of thing.
That would be brilliant. Yes. Good thinking.
And it's going to look just like that, except bright pink.
Okay, very good. So this is the UFO Sightings Desk Reference, if people are curious about that. And there are other number of books, or one other book that you've published as well, and that's the UFO Beat. And so if you go to Amazon.com, just type in Cheryl Costa, you can find, or just go Cheryl Costa UFO, actually, it'll get you there right away. Go to her profile page on Amazon. You can see all of her books there. Cheryl, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right. That's it for Paranormal Now. Everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. Next week, I'm happy to say that James Fox will be joining me to discuss his new documentary, Phenomena. And if you haven't watched it, it's definitely worth the watch, particularly the last 15 minutes of that film. Really, really well done. And I will say this. Some of the critiques out there, whenever UFO documentaries come out, is, they rehash some old cases. But it's also about how you frame and how you discuss those cases that adds a tinge of new perspective or an entirely new perspective on those cases. So check out Phenomena for next week's show. James Fox. If you have any questions in advance, you can find me on Twitter at paranormal_now and just tweet your questions at me and I'll make sure to ask James. And of course, we will have the open lines open next week. I have to apologize on my end. For some reason, I was having issue with the phone line app. So I'll try to work on that this week to make sure those lines are up and running. So you can call in and ask James your question. All right. Again, everyone, be well. Happy Thanksgiving. I wish you and your loved ones all the best this holiday season. And I want to special thank our head of operations, Eric Brager, our producer, Bill Skywatcher, and as always, until next time, live in the mystery.